People who have seen something they could never explain. What was the thing? A tree fell in front of us while we were driving. It almost killed us. Moments later, a group of men dressed in nice clothes just happened to have chainsaws in their car, that was black and black-tinted windows. They started cutting up the tree. We quickly turned around and said, "Nope." I tried to tell myself that it was just Mormons, who happened to have chainsaws in the back of their car. I called my mom the other day to see if she still remembers that incident, and she does. Having grown up very rural, I've definitely heard of stories like, well, we were on the way to the funeral when the tree falls across the road. Luckily, we had the chainsaws from last night. Literally my cousin. Well, we were on our way to the hospital, but my wife started giving birth in the back of the truck, so we just pulled into a parking lot, and luckily I still had all the calving supplies in the bed. Kid's fine by the way. He's like 11 now and awesome. Glad to hear Heffery is doing okay. Short version. 14 years old, pretending to sleep at a friend's house and instead walking around the city, Colorado Springs, Colorado, at around 3 a.m., and suddenly for about 2 to 3 minutes it's bright as day across the whole city. I could clearly see mountains probably 5 miles away. And then poof, back to dark. There was no obvious source of the light. That was around 35 years ago. Still have no clue what it was. Edit. Surprised this post got any attention, also amazed at how many others had very similar experiences. Agree with the feedback suggesting a meteorite is the most likely explanation. It was not a cloudy night, so I think electrical ground source bouncing off clouds is less likely. Those suggesting iridium satellites, this was mid to late 80s, so I don't think they launched yet. And yeah, there's a ton of military stuff in the area. NORAD, the Air Force Academy, Peterson AFB, and I think a few others were mentioned. I think these are less likely than a meteorite because of how far up and down the mountain range I could see. Also, folks mentioning a meteorite probably wouldn't last 2 to 3 minutes. I think my time perception could be off. I froze up and just stared at the basin for of the city and the very prominent mountains. For however long it was. It felt like a few minutes, but maybe it wasn't. The odd thing with any explanation is that the light source was clearly on my side of the Rocky Mountains. The whole Front Range was visible, so the source seems like it had to be from above. Yet I couldn't see any point of light in the sky where intuition says it had to be. Still, I suppose they have been nestled behind some geography that blocked my view but didn't block it casting light on the basin of the city, mountain range. That seems plausible. Meteorite burning up in the atmosphere most likely. Saw a video recently of this happening in India, went from pitch black to nearly daylight. How often can that happen? I've witnessed something similar, but I'm not sure if it was also a meteorite incident. About 45 tons of meteorite material vaporizes in the atmosphere and lands on the surface of Earth as dust every day. So pretty dang often. So the world is expanding in size? Yes. But at a pretty much inconsequential rate, as far as humans are concerned. In the same vein, the moon is retreating from the Earth at a rate of about 43 millimeters. An LT, 2 inches, per year. Edit. Fix the less than sign. I fly helicopters for a living. I was working on a power line one year and was going back to our landing zone and noticed an opening in the trees, what appeared to be a leg. I came back and tried to get as low as I could into the clearing, thinking it was a person. It was a full-grown cow that had been completely skinned. There were no farms around and the animal didn't appear to be cut up in any way. I went back to the landing zone, picked up one of my ground crew members and flew back with him just so he could verify that I wasn't crazy. The flight back, we were both kind of in awe because we have no idea how that animal got to where it's at. Even more so that it had no skin on its entire body, it looked like a perfect cow sans skin. A skinwalker decided to go cow for the afternoon. Or someone skinned a cow in the middle of the woods because where else can you practice skinning things? It sounds like he while working in a rural area, so I feel someone with access to a full cow already has their own land to practice on. I knew someone once who was illegally flying a small aircraft, very rural area, and, for a variety of reasons, had a ton of shrimp on board. The aircraft started losing altitude and they decided to lighten the load by throwing the shrimp overboard. It left a lot of locals very confused about a large amount of raw shrimp in the trees. Maybe the cow didn't go up. Illegally flying, ton of shrimp on board. Sounds fishy. A voice sounding like my friend's sister calling out his name from a tree line in a park. Me and friend were walking home near the middle of the night. Both of us heard it. He was called out 3 times. Crazy how you always hear these stories. I heard my wife calling me from the basement, but she was out of town, or similar. The story always ends with, I was super freaked out, so I ran. We never hear the perspective of somebody who approached the voice. Those who approach the voice do not live to tell. Or those who approach just have a boring story to tell. Imagine exactly the same post but ending with, so we went to see what was going on, and it turns out it was some drunk girl calling her friend. That story would be near the bottom of this thread, not the top. There's a Richard Feynman story like that about how people only remember coincidences when they match up. One time he has the strongest feeling that his grandmother died. Just then, the phone rings. Expecting bad news from family, he tentatively answers it. It's a wrong number. His grandmother was totally fine. This is my go-to explanation for confirmation bias. You think of your best friend and they text you that very instant. A weird coincidence, but you don't think too much of it. The next day you think of your friend and again, they text you that very instant. Okay, things are getting weirder. The third day the exact same thing happens. Even a rational person at this point might start thinking they're psychic. But the thing is, this person is your best friend. You can easily be thinking of them in passing. Hundreds of times a day. Potentially thousands. But you don't remember these fleeting thoughts. It's only when your thoughts are bookmarked by the phone call that you remember. If you could remember all the data, this event will appear like what it really is, a slight statistical anomaly. One time I heard a voice that sounded like my mom's coming from the basement. Only problem was, she'd been dead for 3 years. I grabbed my chainsaw and shotgun and said, "Here I come, Mama." Turned out it was just a stupid demon. That must have been a huge relief. I was standing on the seaside walkway with a bunch of other people watching the sunset. A red orb came speeding down the coastline at like 50 to 150 meters altitude. Didn't think much of it until it instantly stopped and speeded back the way it came until it was out of sight. No noise, too low for a plane or helicopter. And wasn't a flare because it was flying fast, stopped instantly and then flew back the way it came. Several people saw it, but this was before mobile phones with cameras were a mainstream thing. I've seen the same thing, but in red and green. It was probably around 1 a.m. I was outside with my 2 friends, but when I saw it I was alone. I looked out at the sky over a few houses and I saw a red ball, diamond-looking thing, and I thought it was a meteor or shooting star at first. But it also had this long disappearing green trail following it. The thing shot down into like the middle of the sky, then shot right back up just as fast. It was super quick and was over in like 2 seconds. Crazy shit. Edit. I honestly can't remember if the ball was red and the trail was green or vice versa. But it's one of those lol. Saw exactly the same thing you described, the green orb. 12 to 1 a.m. or something during a barbecue with the missus. It had a green trail and not like fairy glitter type trail. 2 to 3 seconds like yours. Happened back in August 2022, I think. Malaysian, by the way. Edit. Wife saw it too. We were chillin' on the hammock when we saw it. She was angry at me because I had acknowledged the presence of the orb. Malays to be precise, have this weird rule to never acknowledge weird stuff happening around us, especially if you're in the wild. Just let it happen and ignore it. Lol. I want to see a Malaysian paranormal activity where the characters just keep resolutely ignoring all the weird shit happening in their house. Sounds like Malaysian people and people from the Appalachian Mountains have that in common. If you saw something, no, you didn't just ignore it and it'll leave you alone hopefully. My sister told me a similar story. Early 90s, she looked out her window one evening and saw a green ball of light move around low in the sky. She said she learned multiple people saw it that night. In like 93 or 94, I saw the exact same thing. I thought it was Santa Claus, but this is the first time I'm hearing the story from anyone else. And it's multiple people. What part of the globe? It was incredibly fast moving just above the treetops and it was almost like green glitter. Was just around sundown. Because I remember the sky was dark but my bedtime was early since I was only a kid. Was talking on the phone to my dad in the garden, about 15 years ago. Saw an orange light slowly come up over some trees behind my house, then take